So welcome back. Our next speaker is Malia Weinhagen. She has been a doula for many years, as well as a birthing coach, and she knocked it out of the park at our last convention. So I'm sure we're all really excited to hear what she has to say today. So, Malia Weinhagen.
Thank you. First, I want to say just a little disclaimer. I'll be talking about some symptoms or effects, and this is not a diagnosis. If you have symptoms, go seek out good medical care, and I just want to share over my years the data that I've gathered working with the moms that I have. So what I want to talk about, we've talked a lot about this conference about that feminine characteristics, those feminine traits that are really quite harmful. And I'm going to talk a lot about the opposite of that.
Yay!
Thank you, Bryan. So that pathological feminine is simply a hot mess in that emotional state. And obviously, if we look around society, we're going to see the effects of that massive emotional dysregulation. I also want to point out, it is both genders. It isn't just a female dysregulation. It is a male dysregulation. So like Bryan talked about, there is pathological feminine traits in both of us, both genders. So what I want to talk about is the opposite of that pathological feminine mindset, attitude, personality, whatnot. For me, as a responsible female, my goals limit my actions to not violate reciprocity is very important to me. It is very important to the women that I circle with, and that we instill that in our children. The other is I want to hold myself accountable for the property in my care. That means my children and my relationship with my husband, my part in that role. Now there's a lot of ways how you guys got to be here in this room. Everyone has a slightly different journey, slightly different path, but we all ended up here. I had my dark night of the soul, and I sought out support. Women so much happens in pregnancy, labor, delivery. Labor and delivery right now is so hard on women. It is a very traumatic event, even if most things go right. So there is so many aspects to being emotional that because you look like an adult, you should have that mastered. And so many physically aged women who may not have had the healthiest upbringing, have had healthy parents, doesn't mean that they're capable of doing these things yet, just because they're adults, just because they're mothers. So each woman needs to take an honest inventory with their spouse or their peers, where they're at, and find out what do they need. If they don't, there's consequences to that, right? There could be postpartum depression. There can be anxiety that's off the charts. And so looking for the tools to support that. So for me, that was dialing in my nutrition, looking at chiropractic care, homeopathic care, looking for functional medicine, things that, and I'll get into this a little bit later, going to mainstream doctors for me just didn't feel like they were acknowledging my whole self. They wanted to treat a symptom with a medication, and that just didn't line up with me. I didn't want to be numbed. I didn't want to be turned off. I wanted a more holistic approach. So each person needs to find out what that is. One of the biggest things, though, that for me in my work and what I see with the women that I work with is addressing our nervous system. And I'm talking about the sympathetic nervous system, that part that is not under control. You know, we control our muscles, but we can't control our digestion. We can't control that fight, flight, freeze state. There's also one called fawn. And then also, the state ideally to be in is calm and safe. So when we feel stressed, like there's a lion in the room, you know, that's a very simple, oh shit, there's a lion in the room, right? And so then we know, where are we? Can we get away? Where are we? Do we have to fight? Or maybe we went deer in the headlights, I'm frozen, I don't know what to do. But there's another one called fawn. And both genders do this, but it is an instilled need to make the other happy so that you don't attack me, you know, kind of a mindset. I'm going to try to please you. And it's saying I'm not a threat, but it's also saying I'm pleasing, don't harm me. Is very much what that fawn state is about. And both genders can step into this response. Then obviously the ideal one is feeling calm and safe and centered. And this is the only area where we can critically think. If we're in any of the others, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, we are incapable of critically thinking because our nervous system thinks we're under threat and under attack. So take these concepts and apply them out in society right now. I mean, you look at all of these angry people who want to fight for these rights that they think everybody should be listening to. They're in fight mode. Their nervous system is not in a calm and centered state. They're not thinking critically. And so the work that I've done studying for me how to downregulate my nervous system is you cannot go from a fight, flight, or freeze state to a calm state permanently. There is this pendulation that has to happen. So if you've been activated, we'll just take depressed. So that's a freeze state. So if you're depressed for a period of time, you cannot flip a switch and realize I'm safe and now I can spend 8 hours a day in this safe space. Your nervous system needs to be exercised, just like your muscles do, just like your brain does. It needs to be exercised. So seeking out practitioners who are skilled in understanding the nervous system, skilled at developing tools to do the downregulation, because if you're constantly activated in your nervous system, it's a really hard place to be a lot of the time. And you desperately want to feel better. You desperately want to feel calm and safe. Whether it's for your children, for your spouse, for your job, you desperately do. But to understand it is a process and a skill that you have to develop. And it just takes time. And we live in a world where we're cranky if we don't get our Amazon order in 2 days, you know, like we want this instant now everything. But the body doesn't care what our society is like. It is where your nervous system is at. Let's see, I might come back to this. This applies to both genders. Just one second. This applies to both genders because, you know, the emotional hot mess woman postpartum or in your house or whatnot, but also you men. You men can easily get into a freeze state because you are so exhausted, you are so overwhelmed, you feel like you have way more problems than you know how to solve and you want to solve them all yesterday. And that can very easily activate a freeze state. So taking the time to build the awareness of this process is going to give you greater capacity to do your role. And that's to step up and be that best father for your family, for your wife, and in your community. Because I work mostly with pregnant women and postpartum care, but this goes both ways. My son struggles with his nervous system. It's, I've talked to many men that this is both. We all have this nervous system. We all have lions that, if we all took a minute and looked around, there's actually no lions in the room right now. But, we could be sitting right now in a freeze state, a fight. We've been talking about war for a couple days. Like, there's some testosterone, like, yeah, but then how is the critical thinking? Now, this room is very intelligent. These people have mastered and worked very passionately for this. But think about the average person, so this definitely goes both genders.
Yeah, so I deal with a lot of underdeveloped males. They're biologically adult, but because of their upbringing and whatnot, they are cognitively feminine. They have not yet initiated into manhood. So we see a lot of flight, freeze, and fawn reactivity in them, especially if they find themselves in a relationship or even a marriage to a dominant woman who is in the role of the mother. So they're trying to please.
Yes.
And these are high stress relationships for these males.
Well, absolutely. They don't have they've chronologically aged, they've biologically aged to the appropriate age, but they're, for whatever reason, isn't emotionally, mentally ready, and then they don't have the skill to navigate the nervous system, so then it's constantly being activated and triggered. And the thing is, this isn't something we choose.
No.
And so you could be simmering in a fight state and not know it, and then a door slam, and then you just come off your hinges. It's just a moment, because this is not by choice. This is your nervous system. I didn't have a mother and a father who understood the emotional state, and I shoved down, you don't be angry. You don't show me those dark, big feelings. Like, no way. I don't just want to see that happy Christian, And so as we've got a few generations where we don't have emotional health, and then, the beauty of children, they will show you all of the pieces that you need to work on, Like, they're going to have meltdowns over the strangest things. And you're just like, why are you being irrational? And just come on. They've not matured. They're childlike. They're going to explore their feelings. But what I noticed is the women and men, but because I work with mostly women, who take the time and develop this skill of understanding their nervous system have exponential more capacity to help their children navigate those big feelings and meltdowns. And that's what we need to do. We need parents who can show our children, yes, anger is a feeling, and it is not bad. It can be good. We can feel shame. Let's feel the shame and process having that shame instead of shove it down. We don't want to talk about that ugly, awkward feeling. Let's be a happy Christian and smile, or whatever version that is. But that, to me, is my biggest role, is to be, you start out, let's see, I might be getting ahead of myself. So it says here, our culture, society, and world is intense. Most of us seldom are in a calm and safe state. We're often activated state of stress, and our nervous system was not designed to be in the stimulated this long without support. So some of these common symptoms that you guys might be noticing is you can't sleep. If your nervous system is in a fight mode, but it is your typical dominant state, you're not going to be able to go to sleep. Your brain is like, and your nervous system's like, there might be a lion coming into this room. And it is just activated. So another one is you feel numb, or you're always angry. You know, someone brings you the wrong meal. I mean, I think we've all seen this. Someone brings the wrong meal at a table next to us, and someone just loses their shit. Like, I ordered pasta. What are you bringing me seafood for? You know, like it has nothing to do with what came, but their nature in that moment was a very dominant fight state in their nervous system. And so, if you're dealing with depression, that is very often a dominant freeze state. Now, I am not diagnosing. If you're feeling symptoms, seek out medical professionals. But I want to point out there are some correlations to understanding this impact on the nervous system. So let's think about this in relationships. If you have a woman who either she's at the home full time or she's working, and then the end of the day comes, the kids are finally asleep, and she's just like, leave me alone. It's most likely her nervous system is overstimulated and overactivated, and she just needs to downregulate. And so taking into account that there's this very powerful force that is in your dynamics of your relationship. You have one and she has one. And you two need to find a way to communicate and find tools to understand the systems in your body. If you don't, it is going to be massively challenging to move forward. It's only going to grow because the body does things until it gets your attention. You know, if you constantly get a stomach ache or heartburn, well, then all of a sudden you don't address it, it could easily turn into an ulcer. You know, your body will continue to keep doing the things until you're willing to look at it. And so,
so if I'm lusting after my wife all the time, how does that fall? What category does that fall into?
that remember I said seek out therapy? That's about the part I've got. I got nothing else for you.
It feels like there's a lion in the room.
But the reason why I want to bring this up is it was so eye-opening for me about the impact of myself and how this was for my children. When my children have a busy day and they're, that 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock meltdown, their nervous system is just done. I don't need to take it personally, and so holding this space that this is happening, well, my job is to be a container for them because they don't have the skills to do it on their own yet. So my job is to hold that space for them, not react. I can go react later. I can go to my husband and go, are you fucking kidding me? Do you get what's happening? This is mental. But in the moment, I need to be present and I need to be a container for them so that they can have the space. And then we start to develop skills. We learn, wow, that was a really big feeling. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay, so remember when you first started feeling that? What can we do with the next time so that's not so big next time? So then they're exercising. It's still okay to be overwhelmed. It's still okay to be angry. It's still okay to be upset. But how do I have the skills to respond and navigate those big feelings? I mean, how great would it be if we could have these kind of conversations with people in society now? Because they don't. They're angry, they're pissed. They can't even articulate themselves. So my responsibility is to ensure that I have the capacity to handle emotions and teach my children so that they can start out co-regulating together, learn to self-regulate themselves so that they can become the best version out in society. And if they need to take that anger and go fight, they have the skills to do it without freezing.
I like how you brought up the first, what was it called? Fawn. I love how you brought that up. The second thing I like is that it's, if you say, I need to help you with your nervous system, that's separating the problem from you. And I like that because it's really easy to look at the other person and say, you're a problem, versus you're being affected by your nervous system and you're being affected by something that is much harder for you to control, and that you need help with. So it's like, that takes it from being you're something to this is just heavy, you need somebody to help you lift it.
So one thing I want to add, now dads, you guys are brilliant in your passion to teach your children. And when something is wrong or something is not right, you see, I need to correct this. If your child is in the middle of a tantrum and meltdown, their brain has no capacity at that moment to learn anything new. So that teachable moment is not then. Okay, dads? Take notes. Because it's only going to infuriate you because you care. You want your child to be their best. And this moment went sideways. You know how to correct that. That is not the time. Now, I'll tell you a secret that it took me, I think it was just 3 months ago that I learned this. If your child is having a massive meltdown, you find something that they're good at and you ask them for help with it right now. They're melting down, they're overwhelmed. They're melting down, they have shame. They're in front of their family and they are dysregulated and they cannot control themselves. Even if you have no capacity for them to have shame, they're feeling shame. So the best way to shift that is you find something that they're good at and you shift gears 180 degrees. So, Birgit, what was that song you were singing? Okay, you were singing something about the itsy bitsy tomato. No, it was the itsy witsy giraffe. Oh God, I can't think of what was that song? You do something that will pull them out so they can be the expert, so that they can shine. And then that's gonna help their nervous system, zoom, realize that it's safe. And then later, you can find time to have a conversation when they're normally going to come back and apologize. I'm so sorry, I was so upset. And you can have a conversation about, dude, we have big feelings. And this is how we learn to navigate those big feelings and those skills. Let's name it and let's figure out some tools to address it. Yeah.
This can tie very much into attachment theory and the importance. That's John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. And in terms of developing a secure attachment, is the parental responsibility and importance of emotional responsiveness and emotional availability.
Yes.
So in terms of being a father, you kind of are pointing out fatherhood here. We are under sociocultural norms as men to kind of avoid feelings, let's push them aside, let's shun them. But it really is important, and the research has borne this out, to provide some kind of a container and a sense of presence to your child's emotions.
Yes.
So.
The female nervous system evolved to be able to extend over that of those children who are not yet able, the nervous system is not yet evolved enough to do it itself.
Yes, and so a mother, we are emotional. I have been, reading everybody in the room. I don't know how to turn that shit off. It's how I'm wired, it's how I'm made. But I'm supposed to take that role and I'm to be that container for my child. It doesn't matter if there's 6 or there's 18. Whether a child is on the spectrum or the child, whatever the reason is, my job is to be that container to hold that regulation until they have the skills to self-regulate themselves.
So what you're saying is, I'm always dealing with the question. I'm trying to say, okay, the sex difference is a responsibility. That comes down. It sounds like I'm saying irresponsibility is. I'm saying when I say it in political terms, I mean responsibility for commons, which exposes you to risk.
Yeah.
Right. That's a different thing from saying female responsibility for the emotional relation of those people whose emotions cannot be regulated on their own.
Right.
That's a burden. right? That's why it was like you brought up motherhood, the birthing process.
Right.
I've had 3 wives. I have a nervous breakdown every time my wife's. I can't believe a human being can do that.
Yes.
And then hate me in the middle of it. You did this to me, and then say it was great 2 days later. I'm like, what the fuck has happened to you?
Right.
Right.
But that was her nervous system.
Right.
That was her nervous system. She had a phase that went into fight mode. So it was the best thing for her to do is to lash out.
So the thing I'm gonna, you like your husband, you tend to work at the local, the individual level. And I tend to work at the political level. So it's just interesting to me that what you're doing is you're giving me a little bit of an insight into how to describe the division of responsibilities rather than the way I do it, since I'm always talking about the commons.
Right.
Right? And I'm saying, well, the problem of women is they avoid responsibility of the commons because it exposes you to conflict. But the thing is that there is a female responsibility for emotional regulation.
Yes.
Right, and so I really like how you're putting responsibility into a context which is positive for women. Thank you.
Well, and nobody does it like women.
It's actually essential that women avoid responsibility in the commons so that they do not exhaust their ability to hold responsibility so that it's there for their children.
Let's think about, a woman who's working full time and she's got 2 kids. And so what is her capacity to be the best emotional co-regulator and teaching of self-regulation to her children? And let's look at the possible cost to those children. You're looking at ADHD. Oh, I've got this here. I'll keep up to my slides. We've got kids that are overstimulated or hyperactive. They're hostile. They're being bullied or being a bully. They're disconnected from their family. They're lashing out because they're desperate to be seen. How much of this is happening in society right now? They're having a hard time focusing. They're having anxiety. They're having depression. Now, there's a lot of things that could impact these characteristics, but I'm telling you, understanding the nervous system is critical for improving these characteristics.
So you say, sorry, the reason I'm saying something is I'm into what you're saying. So you're saying is that the mother's responsible for producing a responsibility for the self, and the self in relation to others. And I think what men are trying to do is produce responsibility for commons.
Right?
I think that's probably
Yes.
right. Yes, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So what is our self? Our
the
self
second.
is our emotions. Our self is being able to have the capacity to process things but be able to communiate.
Yeah, that's all.
And you can't be responsible for the commons if you haven't first learned to be responsible for yourself.
Look at society.
Right. So every one of those things you're describing, that's a problem with self-regulation.
Yes.
One of there it is. One of the other things to note too is that you mentioned that while they're in that fight or flight or fawn state, you can't teach them anything.
No.
But here's the great part. As those stress hormones clear from the body, they actually go into a state of hypersuggestibility. And that's the very best time to teach them is sometime shortly after they've calmed down.
So this is the glory of the body. This is a slight side note. I spend a lot of time on researching holistic things. When we naturally have a fever, naturally run its course. We have the fever, it starts, it grows, we rest, we stay hydrated. There's going to be a brain leap in that child. It just is the way it works. There's some brilliant pediatricians who have known this for ages. But if we intervene with medications to suppress that fever, that brain leap will either be stunted or not happen at all. And so our body is beautifully and wonderfully made. We just need to understand some of these tools.
So I have a quick comment, if I could.
Yeah.
So first off, thank you for giving me that as a tactic,
Yeah.
because I'd never thought of that before.
Yeah.
In my personal life, I'm a Marine, so I
Yeah.
didn't know how to deal with my 8 and 4-year-old.
Yeah.
So my thing was, okay, try and discipline them now.
Yeah.
And walk away,
Yeah.
and then leave it to my wife, which doesn't work either.
Right.
And so they're slowly gaining power over us in our relationship because of that. So that's a great way to do it.
It is. So if any of you guys, most of us, if we've struggled, if we have some capacity for emotional regulation, most of the time that skill came to us from an older female. You've got a grandma who was cope with your emotions. You had an aunt. You had somebody older in your life hold capacity while you navigated your emotions. The other place where this can come out, where you can develop the skill, is the military or something like that, the law enforcement, because you've got to focus and get your job done no matter what. Now, in my opinion, I don't think the military does it the healthy way, but it helps to develop some skill and, to survive. So you don't get frozen when the lion comes, when the threat comes, right? But there's still that skill. You still need to know. You still have shame. You still have anger. How do you authentically navigate it when the crisis is over? You know, that's a skill that needs to be exercised.
Or you had a therapist or coach or some other interventionist with that feminine capacity to do that for you.
Yes, that is another option, but it is also most likely a female.
Not always.
Not always, but often.
My wives and girls and friends always try to regulate my behavior. It often includes slapping me in the back of the head.
That's an option?
No comment.
That'll make things so much easier.
If a pattern is repeating itself, there might be something to be learned there, Curt.
Yeah, women always whack you in the back of the head.
I haven't yet.
I can work
But
with that.
I also have my husband. All right. So what I do is I co-regulate with my children, and I hold space for them to have their meltdowns and tantrums. I teach them it's okay to have all those feelings, identify and name the feelings, and learn how to notice when these feelings come and grow, and build the skills to process them in a healthy way. I think we talked about that. But think about it. Like, if we build more and more children, and we ourselves learn, there's been a couple guys who have said during this weekend, those people don't deserve my anger. And that is brilliant. But that is self-regulation. That is where we need to be. That's where we need to be as parents, and that's where we need to get our children to be. Because then they are not going to have any trouble going to war when it needs to be done. So this I talked about, first you start out with co-regulation, and then it graduates to self-regulation when they're capable of doing it on their own. So this is really interesting that I'd like to point out. A responsible female, sorry, there's some editing here that should have been done. I know and understand the weapons of a dysregulated woman. And I can often see that coming before men can. So here's an example. A Karen is livid and yelling at me that I need to mask my kid or get my kid jabbed or whatnot. So what I'm going to do is I've got resources, I've got people that I've connected myself to. I'm involved in parental rights groups, medical freedom groups. So I have knowledge that when a time comes, if some person decides they have to get in my face about something that I'm doing with my choices and my rights as a parent to my children, I'm now empowered and skilled so that I can shut that conflict down. And that's really important. You men have a lot of work to do, but my role is to be able to shut down the threats that come to my young children or come towards me or come towards my spouse in the way that I can play that role of support.
Are you the reason he's so stoic? Is that what you're saying?
No, he was born that way.
Because I can't get away with anything around here.
So my domain of responsibility are my children, my relationship with my husband. Supporting other mothers is very important to me. Most of us don't have healthy upbringings. Most of us don't have support. Most of us don't have community around us. So my job as a woman and mother is to support other mothers if we're in the same stage or younger stage. My job is to then support them and give them the capacity and the tools that I have so that they don't have to take as long to learn it, that they can get the support that they need, and then help the next generation. So this ends and summarizes what I think a role of that responsible, healthy female looks like. Any questions? Thank you.
It was excellent. You integrated into the system. You addressed female responsibility. You made it understandable and actionable and clear. Thank you very much. That was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, so do you have a means to communicate with or interact with our wives?
Sure. Yeah. It's like about that peer thing. Let's set that up. Yeah, no, we definitely. I'm not really on socials, but I'd be happy. Yeah, we can set up a
That'd
way
be
to.
perfect.
Yeah, we can set up a way to connect.
Yeah, because if our wives or our wives' mothers, I'm not speaking about my situation, have had no ability to regulate their emotions and didn't teach our wives, and then we had to teach them. As you mentioned, it's not always that easy for a man to teach a woman, even though I teach emotional regulation, I'm pretty good at it. But it's very difficult sometimes for women to learn from their husband these things because they feel like they should already know it, and so
Right.
they feel so ashamed.
Right.
And so it's so important if women didn't get it as children that there's a woman around that they can talk to that
Right.
they can shame-free learn these type of things.
If you look back in history of cultures that were really doing well, it was women gathered together. And so understanding the phases of womanhood, supporting pregnancy and labor and delivery, and supporting young children and all of that. There was a community that was there. And we have fractured off so horrifically that there's a huge cost that's happening in each home because of that. Well, no wonder women are terrified and want epidurals and can we just plan the surgery now, because they're terrified. They're scared. It goes way longer than it typically needs to. There's so much trauma that can typically happen. We don't have the support in place to educate, prepare, and navigate a pregnancy, labor, and delivery. It's really hard.
I noticed in the Generation X for the first time that the women didn't seem to know how to raise children or what the birthing process was like.
Excellent, Curt. Remember the boomers, the boomers divorced at a rate of 51%. So I'm a Gen Xer. Our parents, from my experience and those of my peers, were and in some cases still are children.
Yeah.
They just never grew up.
Yeah.
So they had nothing to pass.
No. And this wasn't their fault. I mean, it wasn't, this is just the cost. This is the cost of so much of this happening.
Right.
So another case in point, from your presentation, you brought up the word container.
Yeah.
And this was a word I introduced to my significant other about 2 weeks ago. And I struggled to find a way of explaining it without triggering her.
Sure.
She said, whoa, container, I'm not so sure, because she's a successful woman in a lot of domains.
Sure.
Not yet in childbearing, but maybe someday. But having a forum where that word can be disambiguated, because I'm afraid if I was to explain it, it would sound something like, well, I need to pay the cost for your emotions in some form and protect you from the outside world and in that transaction.
Right.
Which might come across, I don't know, it might not
So
be
here's the
received
deal.
well.
If that comes across to her as threatening or a cost, typically that means there's a trigger for her there.
Mm-hmm.
And if she needs to do the work and figure out what that is, because there is no other way. If she's not the container or you can't be the container, there's going to be a cost later on. because the kid's going to still have their emotions. It's never going to end. So it's not, I'm not choosing this. I'm not wanting this to be how it goes. This is just what happens. There's a lot of parenting styles out there, and you can research what works for you, but this nervous system and this nervous system response, it's just an is there thing.
Yeah, I particularly don't like the get divorced and leave your kids behind parenting.
Right.
I do think it's important when you have single fathers, they're going to have to teach their children this.
Well, they are. They definitely can. And my husband's very good. He's learned, to what regulate and co-regulate with our children means. But then also we need our community. So, what is there then? If you have a single parent, is there a faith? Is there what kind of community, what kind of group is around them that can also help fill that role?
Please respect the raised hand and the wireless mic.
Thank you, Francis. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback off what Noah was saying earlier. The other reason why it's really good to have women getting together and having these types of discussions and working through emotional regulation and those sorts of things is because even for us guys that do understand a lot of this stuff, we're not home most of the time.
Right.
We're either out, working or networking or doing something that's outside. So being able to devote enough respectable amount of time just isn't viable for most of us.
Right.
So.
And, there needs to be a paradigm shift in a lot of ways about what the role of being a mother is. People think, oh, it's a second-class job. You're a stay-at-home mom, or all of those things. But are you kidding me? I'm me, not my husband, not any other person. I can read my children like that, and I can hold space for them and support them in the deepest way possible. Like, hello, that's amazing. That's astounding. And that is not a second-class job.
It's also essential.
Yes.
Right? And one of the big things we're running, just to scale this back up again, one of the big things we're running into is we've got kids that aren't at home anymore. So they're not getting the benefit of that co-regulation. So that creates two problems. The kids aren't getting it, and the mom has lost her domain of responsibility. So then the women have lost one of their primary domains of responsibility. And then we look at them and go, women are evading responsibility. But we've taken away a primary domain for female responsibility. Right? So we actually introduced two major issues simultaneously there. We've got a bunch of dysregulated kids running around that turn into dysregulated adult-age children. And we've got women without a domain of responsibility, and we have the expectation still that they're going to be expressing responsibility. So, that has civilizational level impact.
Right.
We have hired a full-time. My wife has no reason to work, except it was.
Sure.
Right? I hired a full-time nanny.
Sure.
Great. I hired an angel. My son loved her. Right. Still does. Right. She's still part of the family, essentially. But who can afford to do that? Right. You just can't. You can't afford it. Ordinary people can't do it.
Right.
It was this thing cost us $50,000 a year, I think.
Right.
I was just gonna ask about a particular situation I've seen with like the older generation of women who have kind of done the divorce thing, and they've they're probably a lot of our parents or our in-laws or whatever, and they've kind of developed this situation where the men that they've been with or the men they've dated, they haven't been reliable. They have fallen down on the job. So their experience with men is that men leave them hanging. They don't support them properly. And then they end up not trusting men who actually might be competent and can get things done. And so they get in the way a lot. What's your experience with that, I guess, and what's like a good way to navigate that situation?
Well, that woman needs to take care of herself and go find support, building the skills so she can have that emotional. The thing is, if she's not feeling safe, then she's not going to be critically thinking. And if she's not critically thinking, is she going to choose the best men?
Have her sing Itsy Bitsy Spider.
So I think that we have to take self-responsibility. And so it's shitty that some men aren't being supportive and doing their role, but she can't control that. She can control her. So then if she doesn't have the skills, then she needs to go find skills to down-regulate herself, to develop critical thinking skills so that she can make better choices, is what, just from the general.
Hello.
Hi.
Being a father and recognizing the importance of the feminine
Found a woman
in.
who would read with you?
I found one. I was just as surprised as you, sir.
I was congratulating you on the hard work.
One of the things that I know, especially in my generation, is the idea, because I work a lot to support her being able to stay at home with our little one.
Yeah.
And I was very surprised talking to my coworkers, especially the female ones, who see that position and they envy it. That's what they want. And they said, it's so great that you're doing all this work and you're pushing as hard as you are so she can just stay at home and be with the kid. She's not just staying at home. I am working this hard so I can hire her to be in her best domain as a mother. I promoted her to the position of mom.
Yeah.
The highest position with the most impact that she can. She's an incredibly talented woman. And she says it every single day, that this is the best role that she has ever had and the most impactful role that she has ever had.
You better make 6 kids, dude.
She has to participate. But that's a framing that I think that needs to move forward, especially is the role, like I think the generations ahead of us really kind of took it for granted. Mom is mom, she's going to have the kids, she can work the career, and I think a lot of women got baited into that position, again, probably by the unreliability and failure to perform in that role as a father, the men that they were with. And the man not taking that responsibility and not viewing it as what I just said. I have a high quality female and I am promoting her to the position of the keeper, the co-regulator and the container for my children, and that is in their best interest.
Right.
You're not just the mother of my children, not just my wife.
Right.
It is that active exchange in value and understanding that role, that formal role, and the status that it should entail.
Okay, Brandon, don't you have something to say about, don't you have a little thing on how happy women are if they have a little job, but most of their job is working with other women raising children?
Yes. Well, is this on?
That's a Brandon answer. Yes.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I mean, regulating children is easier when they're together and there's more than one mother. And getting jobs done that require, repetitive work are easier to get done when there are people around you.
Right.
Our people love one another. The fact that we are isolated and separated is what's killing us.
Yes.
Right? So it is easy for us to say, we will go do the work, but you got to stay home.
Yeah.
You got to stay home and do the work that we can't do.
Right.
And for the broken women, men are supposed to play that container for your emotions that you play for your children.
Yes.
That's why we require the stoicism that all of our people teach, the mindfulness that we teach, because we have to sometimes hold emotions for other people.
Yes.
Men who lead have to hold emotions for entire groups. Right? It can breaks most people.
Absolutely. But that's where the strength of that emotional capacity is critical for both roles, because you men have a lot on your shoulders, as well as being the container for your spouse, and then your wife gets to do her work. Absolutely.
Just one more comment here, real quick. Like both your guys' point, it's on us to fix this. Right, the broken moms, they're not part of the fixing it. We hope we can reach out to them and fix it. Right, that our mothers, your mother, those guys. Between Malia and I, we did the math once. Between us, our parents have 13 divorces. We've been married for 2.5 decades. It wasn't modeled to us. We worked on it. We built this. Not knowing what we were doing, we built this, right? So it takes us to fix this. It takes us to rebuild this.
Yeah.
All right. These are developed skills. You aren't just born with them.
My grandchildren are going to have amazing lives, and I can't wait for that. And, you know, now my children are doing well and doing great, but the work I'm doing and what I'm fighting for is for my grandchildren and everybody else that's to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
One more. Oh, sorry.
Josh.
So in the prospect of like looking for, you know, potential mate for that kind of thing, what is there? So there are plenty of women that they still have issues. They haven't gone through the full development.
Yeah.
Can that responsibility of helping them acquire those things be upon, you know, someone like myself or the male partner? Can they help them through that if they didn't receive those developments?
I think it comes down to how you communicate, and if you see value in that, then and they are in a position where they're calm and safe and they're open to have those conversations, then it could turn into something. But if you're seeing a chick that your eyes like and you're like, yeah, I want to go in this direction, right. then you're, you know, good luck, roll the dice. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Right. There was like I think there are with some a point of no return, but yeah, that's the other thing.
But I think that, you know, I don't know if you heard my husband's talk where he said, you know, list out your 3 critical things in your world that you value the most. Go focus on those things and go do those things, and then you're going to most likely find a lady who values those things too, and that's going to set you into some common ground, and that is going to have a better potential to find in my opinion, what I would think would be a good connection versus like a shot in the barrel kind of thing.
Well,
that's.
Oh, here you go.
I just want to say, in tagging off him, if the man teaches his partner that, then that's an investment because he's teaching her.
Yes.
So that she can teach the child.
If she's in a calm state, that would be a brilliant thing. I mean, how great to know about self-regulation, co-regulation, and the nervous system going into a relationship. Those could be some really rich conversations, for sure.
Sometimes we should do a thing on this subject. Be interesting to do it together. I always want to comment on riff off what you're saying is that for men, you sort of need to you need to have a way to think about things, systematize. And weirdly enough, I went to a private Catholic boys' school taught by Xaverian monks. Okay, but the best class I had in high school was marriage and family. It's a year long on how to be married. I can't stay that way apparently, but I'm really good at getting married. But
how did you say last a year?
Well, no, I was married for 20 years. It's not that, but that was it. And what you learn is that if you actually anybody you can look at and share values with, you can learn to love. Right. So it's actually pretty easy. The problem is getting to the point where you can understand that you're compatible and you want the same things and you're willing to work together to get them. It's just getting increasingly hard to do that.
Absolutely.
The second thing I learned is that is the whole thing of listen and shut the fuck up.
Right.
I can do it, believe it or not. No, I mean,
The microphone just told him.
Thanks. So no, but as a guy, the whole thing is don't try to solve the problem. Try to solve the emotion, right? And it's so hard for a guy to learn to do that. And I sort of think of it as like I have to turn off 3/4 of my brain, and when I'm listening, and just sort of say how does How does she feel about this? How does she feel about this? Why does she feel about this? And that's all you have to do is listen and understand. That's the second thing. And the third thing is, and I make fun of my divorces because I only had my marriage. The first marriage was a couple of years. My last marriage was 1 year, right? So, and the last marriage is because I had to get married to stay in the country. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't married for over 20 years, right? So, in long term, I've never had this dating thing, right? I find a woman I get along with, and I have a long term relationship, and it's usually on average 4 years, unless we get married less. So, I'm trying to downplay my whole game that I emphasize. So the point with a marriage, so the thing I've learned in relationships with women, it's really simple. Find out what makes her feel safe and make that happen.
Yeah.
That's really it. There's nothing else to it. How is she gonna feel safe?
Yeah.
How do I make that happen?
Yeah.
So when I was thinking as you were talking, I was like, oh, so I got to do that for the women, so they can do that for the children.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I heard you say.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, that's exactly the same process. And so you say, I'm responsible for making her feel safe enough to open up her emotions to regulate those of others.
Yeah.
And it's like women love it, and you're like. And I remember telling to Amanda when I was dating Amanda up in Canada, as I said, no, I know, I figured out what it takes to make you safe. It'll take me 14 months, 15 months to get you there. And she's like, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, it worked, right? It just takes a while sometimes to make that woman trust you and you consistently enough. And the problem with guys is we can get caught up in the emotional stuff because we don't understand it and not get around to the very basics of listen.
Yeah.
Manage the emotion, not the thing.
Yeah.
Create the safety, and then she'll be it. Because women they want it, right? I mean, is anybody that women want to feel safe? You just give it to them. They love it.
I have to say this. Just remember, when the woman is emotional, she is not looking for your toolkit. She wants your presence. She wants your presence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last question.
So some people will hear this and they'll notice a couple key words you said are very often used in people who are not really solving the problem on the left, and it's the hold space specifically.
Oh, sure.
The reason is they're approaching it wrong. They hold space and then encourage
Emotional indulgence versus emotional processing.
Sure.
And what you're talking about is giving the children a safe place to process the emotion and learn from it versus indulge in it and reinforce it.
Yes.
And this is the difference of responsibility. You're teaching your children to have responsibility for their emotions versus teaching them to wallow in them.
Right. So here's the thing. When I say hold space and when I say container, this is my definition and my expression of it. I'm not just numb. I'm not just bored thinking about what we having for dinner while I'm quiet, while they're melting down and I'm just being quiet. I'm thinking about, I can relate. Feeling overwhelmed makes me want to cry too. Feeling angry, I get that is a big feeling. So what am I thinking about as I'm being their container? I'm literally grounding myself and thinking about, I'm grounded, I'm centered. You can have big feelings. Anger is big. It can be really intense. It can be really overwhelming. So I'm literally participating with them I'm modeling it. I'm holding that capacity and I'm modeling it silently. The less I say, the better. And then they're able to process that. So that's what I mean by container. So I don't know what their version of holding space, and that's a really good point because I don't think it's the same thing. I think there's a big distinction there.
Use the words wrong.
Absolutely. There's one hand up over here.
I just want to thank you because me not being a mother, you're giving me perspective on the maternal experience. I'm going to have to add something to my slide deck. You remember my image of the blue chalice?
Yes. Yes.
Retain, receive, return.
Yes.
Add relate to that.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I should be capable to regulate my emotions. I can relate. I know anger is big. It can be gnarly. It can be overwhelming to bowl me over. But I'm teaching that little one how to navigate that. So I'm literally zipping my mouth. And I was like, I could imagine I could feel that way too if I were you. And then I'd be quiet. And then I do whatever skills I do to keep myself grounded. And that's what I mean by containing. That's what I mean by holding space. But I have to be willing to do my work so that I have the capacity to do it with them. All right, thank you guys very much.